Assassin's Creed is a franchise that I've had a love-hate relationship with for a long time. The first game came out when I was just starting high school. The pre-release trailers and interviews showed a grounded look at the Third Crusades in the Middle East, without any hint at a modern-day twist. Ubisoft touted it as being faithful to the setting and real history, and claimed that the game featured a realistic sword-fighting system as well as deep parkour gameplay. These promises were mostly kept in my eyes, even if they were a little embellished. Sure, you can't really call the fighting realistic, but to my teenage brain, I really couldn't tell the difference. Even still, I loved the concept of the combat on display. Blocking, parrying, and counter-killing your way through hordes of guards was a sight to behold. With clean animations and tons of variety, the spectacle never really wore off on me. It's not the most engaging combat system, but it sold the fantasy of being a highly trained and disciplined killer. And this fantasy only grew with each game, adding unique ways to dispatch your enemies. The animators on these early games must have really loved their jobs because they created some of the coolest fight choreography that I've seen in gaming as a whole, and it all still holds up to this day. But not everyone felt this way about the combat. Common criticisms being that it made the game too easy or even mindless. Not entirely unfair, but I think this criticism is actually part of what led to the RPGification of the franchise, a decision that ultimately divided the fan base. But it wasn't the only thing that led Assassin's Creed down this path. A desire to broaden its audience resulted in Ubisoft chiseling away what made Assassin's Creed to their core player base. Now, if you don't want a breakdown of the old control scheme, go ahead and use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead to the next section. The older Assassin's Creed games had a fairly complex control scheme. The goal was to give the player as much control over your character as possible, while still making it feel like a video game and not a simulator. Each face button on the controller was dedicated to a part of the body. On a PlayStation controller, this meant that X acts as legs, square and circle are your arms, and triangle is your head. Pair this with the low and high profile system and you get a lot of granular control on how you manipulate your character. By default, a full tilt of the analog stick would only result in your character walking at a normal pace, making it easy and natural to maneuver and blend in with large crowds. The functions of the buttons themselves vary slightly from game to game. In AC1, for example, X was a dedicated blend button when used in low profile mode, causing Altair to act as he were praying so he could blend in easily with groups of monks. In AC2, X had multiple functions in low profile, causing Ezio to walk faster, but also allowing him to pickpocket any NPC he came into contact with. Blending then would happen contextually, as long as you stood next to a group of NPCs without drawing attention to yourself. This amount of control let players immerse themselves in the game. You couldn't really play it without giving it your full attention. Circle and low profile let players gently reach out to NPCs carrying fragile objects to prevent you from running into them and causing a scene, whereas using it in high profile would cause your character to lower his shoulder to push through crowds at a running pace without falling over. Or holding circle and a direction on the left analog stick would allow you to reach for a ledge that you may have otherwise missed when making a risky jump off a building. All of these little interactions would slowly be removed from the franchise with each passing entry. Core pillars of design like social stealth and deep parkour mechanics would be stripped away in favor of making a simpler game that more people could play, but maybe not what more people wanted to play. Earlier in the script, I briefly mentioned a modern-day twist. Most people probably don't remember, but this part of the game wasn't always known to exist. Pre-release coverage from E3 and press demos hid the modern-day segments that the most recent titles have nearly completely abandoned. It was genuinely a really cool twist, combining this historical tourism idea with the Matrix. The modern-day segments in AC1 worked as a framing device for a greater narrative. Abstergo, the company that kidnapped what was actually the main character of the franchise, were looking for ancient artifacts that were lost to history. In order to do this, they developed a machine called the Animus that allowed the user to relive memories of their ancestors. So in order to find clues to these artifacts, they needed to use individuals who were related to those who might know where these artifacts were last seen. It was a really fun concept that would evolve into historical and modern-day conspiracy, a pre-human civilization, and techno-mysticism. But as the series went on, it became obvious that Ubisoft either didn't care about the modern-day stuff or felt as if it were holding the series back. It was a point of complaint for some people who just wanted to run on rooftops and stab dudes, but it was a vital anchor point that kept Assassin's Creed from feeling like an anthology series. The games no longer connect in a meaningful way, and they really haven't since Assassin's Creed 3. Early on, it felt like we were building to an Assassin's Creed game that took place entirely in the modern day. Sadly, that dream has long since died. So what caused Assassin's Creed to evolve into what I would describe as a husk of its former self? After putting out a harrowing 7 games in 8 years on the PS3 and Xbox 360 era of consoles, Ubisoft tried to make the leap over to the new generation, releasing 2 Assassin's Creed games on the same day, one on the older generation of consoles and the other on the new PS4 and Xbox One. Ubisoft attempted to leave no one behind and make as much money as possible. Assassin's Creed Rogue would release on the old machines with only 8 months of development time. Rogue would be the last remnant of the old games. It was largely a reskin of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, with a slight narrative twist where you played as an assassin turned Templar. The game mostly went forgotten at the time because Assassin's Creed Unity released on the same day exclusively on the shiny new consoles. It was supposed to be a showcase for what the new tech could do, boasting about larger crowds, a new and more dynamic parkour system, and refined combat that moved on from the counter-kill system that the series was known for. What Assassin's Creed Unity actually delivered, however, was an extremely buggy mess. Missing textures, missing faces, broken mission logic, and hard crashes. Technical issues aside, the game itself also failed to live up to expectations, with a parkour system that, while extremely pretty with great animation work, was ultimately simplified, taking away finer control from the player in favor of automating parkour as much as possible. The new combat system was also extremely disappointing, throwing away counter kills for a more traditional parry and attack system that had you whittle away at a health bar to achieve a killing blow. The combat itself might have worked if it wasn't tied to a heavy gear and money grind that you could conveniently mitigate with microtransactions, which actually made their debut in Assassin's Creed Black Flag through time saver packs that gave the player different resources in order to bypass grinding. Something that no doubtedly influenced each game's core design to encourage players to pay more money to skip the grind. Assassin's Creed Unity was the real start of the RPGification of the franchise, but it wouldn't actually take full form until 2 games later. Assassin's Creed Origins would be the first game in the series that I wouldn't play at launch. Origins is generally liked amongst fans, with some people even calling it a return to form, but there is very little traditional Assassin's Creed DNA in this game despite the game being called Origins. The game tries to explore the origins of the assassins and tells a pretty decent story, but Origins is the point that I lost complete interest in the series. Assassin's Creed had officially turned from an action-adventure game into an action RPG, complete with level-ups, colored gear rarity, status effects, and fantastical character abilities. The games were now unrecognizable as Assassin's Creed to me, closer to a single-player MMO with equal amounts of grinding as well. Assassin's Creed Odyssey would continue this trend, leaning even harder into the RPG side by adding the ability to pick between a male and female protagonist, and adding dialogue options that would affect the main story as well as side quests. A move that Ubisoft openly stated that it wanted to compete with narrative masterpieces like The Witcher 3. This ambition is paper thin though. The writing is nowhere near the same caliber as games half as good as The Witcher 3. Instead, Odyssey is filled with seemingly endless bloat, an open world that is too big, side quests that feel shallow, and a main story that you can't focus on because you will be level gated before you can finish it, forcing you to do laborious side content or swipe your credit card. Thankfully, some of these issues would be softened, though not completely mitigated, in the next game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. A game that I consider to be a terrible Assassin's Creed game, but a decent Viking RPG. Even still, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is entirely too long, a common theme in the RPG age of Assassin's Creed. And that's my biggest issue with the RPG games. They simply do not respect your time because they are built as single-player live service games, filled with junk content that's only there to keep you in Ubisoft's ecosystem long enough to give them even more money on shitty microtransactions. They don't want you to move on, they don't want you to play other more meaningful experiences. They don't want you playing games like the games that they used to make. Games that used to make you think and feel instead of keeping you sedated via mindless checklists and dopamine from level ups and colored gear drops. But is there any hope for the franchise moving forward? Maybe? It entirely depends on if Ubisoft take away the right lessons from Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. While nowhere near perfect, it is at least a step in the right direction. A lot of my issues stem from the remake being built off of Assassin's Creed Shadows, the most recent mainline entry in the series. Shadows is hopefully the last of the RPG games. They trimmed back some of the RPG mechanics and added options for players to turn off or tweak settings to make it play more like a decent stealth action game, at least for one of the characters. Shadows gets a lot of hate, rightfully so, in areas like story, character writing, voice acting, and combat, but there's a pretty good stealth sandbox with great ways to adjust difficulty, and it's an undeniably gorgeous setting. If you do decide to play it, just be sure to buy it on deep discount and skip most of the cutscenes. You might actually have an okay time. As for the Black Flag remake, it is a really pretty, mostly faithful version of the original. Combat is a mix of old and new, though still way too much of the new style of combat in my opinion. It's very similar to Assassin's Creed Shadows, but they added the counter kill back as long as you can time a perfect parry. They even brought back the counter chain kill mechanic, but it doesn't look or feel nearly as smooth as the original due to it being haphazardly strapped onto the new game engine. Black Flag Resynced also completely removed tailing missions and restructured the game to account for this. They added a dedicated crouch button, which is a nice to have but not a need to have, and they added some new side missions and recorded a bunch of new dialogue, though a lot of it seems entirely unnecessary or even out of character. Edward is not a good person for a large part of the story, but the newer lines make him feel very happy-go-lucky and eager to help people out of the goodness of his heart instead of for personal gain. It can be incredibly jarring. They also felt the need to have Edward constantly comment on what he is doing and have him crack jokes to himself during fights. I don't know why modern writing feels the need to do this. Writing like this is universally hated and criticized, even in other well-written games like Horizon or God of War. Another change that they made is they ended up removing the modern day sections, which at this point they had basically given up on, so nothing is really lost here. But most of my issues with the remake, I believe, are a result of them basing it off of the RPG games. Character movement feels floaty in comparison to the original. The old games felt heavy and deliberate in a way that people like me really enjoyed and connected with. This is largely due to the more complex movement system that I laid out earlier in the video. The complete removal of high and low profile movement in the RPG games resulted in a character that feels arcadey and disconnected from the world and environment that they reside in. Sadly, this carried over into the Black Flag remake. But the biggest downgrade from the original is the complete lack of combat variety. As of writing this, you can no longer choose to use your hidden blade directly in a fight, nor can you use your bare hands unless the story demands it. But because you can no longer use your fist, this also means you can't disarm your opponent and use their weapons against them, removing a massive set of weapons like axes, muskets, and single-handed swords, which all had their own unique kill animations. I could go on, but I hope you get my point. I understand that it sounds like nitpicking, but little stuff like this matters, and it is indicative of a greater issue. The remake is good, but it's good in the context of what we've had to deal with in the franchise for over a decade at this point. Our standards should be higher, but I fear that Ubisoft will think that this is good enough. If they go on to remake Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and 3 in this style, but don't fix these little things, then we will be robbed of something that could have truly been great. The series deserves better. It has for a really long time. But the first real test will be in the next mainline title, Assassin's Creed Hexe, or Hex, however you say it, no one can seem to agree. Hexe might give us a glimpse into what the next remake will have in store on a mechanical level. We don't know much about Hexe, but the leaks sound interesting, with the game being set in 17th century Germany during the European witch trials. That tiny piece of information has gotten me the most excited I've been about a setting since Assassin's Creed Unity. But the setting is only part of the equation. It's on Ubisoft to deliver something on a mechanical and story level that can live up to the true legacy of the series. I'm rooting for them. I want to love Assassin's Creed again, but I haven't truly loved an AC game since the end of the PS3 generation. Only time will tell, I guess. Thank you for watching.